right, so today's agenda, we're going to do a brief recap of what we covered in our first webinar to make sure that everybody's up to speed. And then we're going to do basically 2 live demos. So the first, we're going to look at how do you optimize your site for search, which is also called on-page SEO. And then we're going to talk about crafting the perfect blog post for search. So everybody has probably written blog posts or at least some copy for their website, but it's entirely different to think about it from the perspective of how to make sure that that copy or blog post is written well for search. And so we're going to do a live demo using a tool called Yoast SEO to see how that works. And then finally at the end, we're going to cover a lot of topics. I'm sure some of them will raise questions, so we will have a short Q&A. So let's jump right in the interest of time. So the first thing we're going to do is recap last webinar. And in order to do that, let's just talk about the 3 topics we covered. So the first thing we talked about was the seat of power. And so we looked at this concept and talked about how when your business is found through Google, rather than you seeking out your own clients, you tend to own the seat of power and can control negotiations. And so obviously by controlling negotiations, you tend to get better terms on any deal and that you make, and that can have a significant impact on your bottom line. So that kind of speaks to the power of Google. Next, we talked about the factors that determine your ranking in Google search results. So we went over a bunch of different factors, and today's topic we're going to discuss many of the factors that I've highlighted in that red box there. And then the other factors, which are the links and the interaction factors, are what we're going to cover in the 3rd webinar next month. Finally, we also covered search volumes. So we looked at how you determine how much search volume there is in your niche, and what we came to was a conclusion that for retail recruitment, which is obviously just one niche, there was a significant search volume for Google traffic, and we kind of tried to demonstrate how valuable Google can be in terms of finding new business. So that was webinar 1, and now let's jump into the second webinar, which is about SEO Basics, which is really about how to make your site ready for search. And so we're going to start with a demo. So I'm going to exit out of this presentation, and we're going to look at, for this demo, we're going to focus exclusively on a recruiter site. This site is for a recruiting company called Harmer. They're at harmer.com. And they actually recently redesigned the site, not something that Talent Hero was involved in, but I know this is a relatively new site. So I thought I'd like to review it, see what they've done right, and where there are some issues from an SEO perspective, and think about how you might apply these lessons generally to your own business. So everything that I'm going to cover right now is something that you can relatively easily do for your own site to see how well you're performing in terms of SEO. So it's not just looking at this site, but thinking about the bigger picture. So going back to the presentation, the first thing we're going to talk about is page speed. So Google has a tool called Page Speed Insights that lets you test the performance of your site. So all you have to do is go to this URL and or just Google Page Speed Tools, and you will put in the URL of your site. Now, page speed is important because Google uses this as one of the ranking factors to determine the quality of your site. And what we see with Harmer.com is there are a number of issues, and that's kind of quickly summarized in a score that they've received. Their mobile site gets 25 out of 100, desktop 30 out of 100, and both are classified as poor. And what you can see is Google suggests a number of optimizations that can be performed on the site in order to speed it up. And the nice thing about this list is that I would say about 80% of these optimizations can be performed by a developer in under an hour. So if you were to put your own site into page speed tools and see some of these issues, most of them can be fixed relatively quickly by a developer. So you could obviously hire any developer you want. You can hire us, but most of these things can be resolved relatively quickly and can have a significant impact on how fast your site loads. Which not only has the SEO benefits, but also just has a benefit in terms of usability, because all things being equal, people tend to like sites that load faster. They tend to stay on those sites longer. So first thing to look at is page speed. The next topic is mobile responsiveness. So that's basically how well does your site perform on tablets and smartphones. And again, Google has a very friendly tool that lets you test that. And when we run this for Harmer's site, we get good news, which is the page is mobile friendly. And Google actually shows you what the site would look like on the right side here in a smartphone. If you see any issues with mobile usability on your site, you will typically have to spend a little bit more time and money getting those sorted out because they're just a bit more complex. But it is quite important to sort out mobile usability issues, primarily because Google will not rank your business site high if they know that it's not mobile friendly. So you may rank high, for example, on a desktop search, but Google will not have you in the same ranking position on a mobile search if your site is not mobile friendly. So it's quite important to make sure that that is checked off your list. The next thing we're going to look at is URL structure. So this we're going to get a little bit more technical. Try not to get too bogged down in the details though. So most sites on the internet have what's called a site map. If you have a WordPress site, you're definitely going to have one somewhere. This one is generated by a plugin called Yoast SEO, which we're going to get into a little bit more detail later. But basically, this is a plugin that Harmer has installed on their site for SEO purposes. And what it does is it shows you every single page that exists on the site. And I'm going to have a quick look to show you what they're doing well and an area where there's an issue. You can do the same thing for your own site by following this process. So these are examples of all the blog posts on the site. And as you can see, all the URLs are very well structured. And by that I mean you can easily tell what the page is about just from the URL. And that improves, that's a very good sign for SEO. However, if we go back and we look at featured job sitemap, which is essentially all of the job postings on this site, we see there's a bit of an issue, which is that none of the job postings have the job title in the actual URL. Instead, they've opted to use a numbering system, which is unfortunate from an SEO perspective because there's no value in that. Google obviously has no idea what these numbers are referring to. And if you were to ask someone why they might do this, it's often just an oversight. And that's often the case with a lot of issues with SEO, is that if you look at your own site and you see problems, it's not that somebody necessarily made any conscious decisions to do certain things. Oftentimes people just didn't really think through a site from an SEO perspective up front, and you'll find issues like this. So, if you were to look at your own sitemap, make sure that all of your URLs are well structured, meaning that they have within the URL some sort of text indicating what the page is about. Let's go to our next topic, which is a tool called Screaming Spider. So this is a great tool that a lot of SEO experts use, and it can be quite complicated, but there are some basic things you can look at without any sort of special knowledge. So the way it works is as follows. First of all, you can download this tool for free. There is a limitation in the free version, which is that it only crawls 500 assets on your site. Fortunately, if you look in the bottom right corner, you see only 199 for Harmer, so it's crawled a lot of the site. And as you can see, it's not the simplest tool to use without any experience, but I am going to walk you through some of the basics so that you can understand how to at least perform these tasks on your own site. So the first thing we look at is right underneath so first of all, what you do is you put in your URL of your site, just the home page, and then you hit start. And then what happens is that the tool crawls your entire site and eventually it completes. Once that's done, you can start clicking through the various tabs at the top. We're going to walk through just a few of them right now because there's not an interest of time, as well as we're going to focus on the things that have the most impact from an SEO perspective. So the first thing is page titles. So every site on the internet has a title associated with it. And there's a couple of things you want to think about when crafting a page title. First is that you want them to be unique. In this case, Harmer has a number of page titles that are duplicates, and that has very limited SEO value because it doesn't really talk about what the page is about. More importantly, though, I'd say the biggest issue is how these page titles are not very descriptive. For example, they have a services page. And if we look at the description here, we can kind of see that they offer a bunch of different recruiting services or services in different industries. yet their page title does not really capture that. So, and a much improved page title for this page might be something like our accounting, finance, and technology recruiting services. So that would not only describe what the page is about, but it would also give Google a much better understanding of the content of the page. So for SEO purposes, you want to really think about having page titles that have as much description as possible while keeping them to a manageable length. The other thing, if we click the top here, is meta descriptions. So meta descriptions are descriptions of what your page content is about in full sentences that are not typically shown to a user. So, but Google looks at them to help determine what the page is about. And sometimes in Google search results, underneath the link that Google shows, they will show the meta description for your page. So there's a number of reasons these are important. And thinking back similarly to page title, you want to make sure you do two things. One is you want to make sure you have unique meta descriptions for every page. As we can see here, Harmer hasn't done that. They have a lot of duplicate meta descriptions and are losing a lot of SEO value by doing that. Secondly, they all have a bunch of pages that have no meta description at all. So they're really missing out there by not filling these in properly. And so this is something that could be improved on relatively easily simply by going in and writing a meta description that is, properly describes the page and has keywords that are relevant to that page as well. One thing to think about is the length. There's a great column here that tells you how long your meta descriptions are. You typically want to keep them to under 160 characters. So these are probably around an appropriate length, but unfortunately, they're all duplicate. And then the last thing we're going to look at is response codes. This is can be a very complicated tab, so I'm going to only focus on one item that you might want to check on your own site, which is 404. So I'm sure anyone who's been on the internet for long enough has seen a 404 error message. That's really what you get when you click on a link that no longer exists, to a page that no longer exists. What we find is that Harmer had an about page at some point that was harmer.com/about, but that doesn't exist. So if we go there, we're going to get a 404 error. So basically, you should be looking on your site for 404 errors, and you should be either creating the page that's supposed to exist or removing the link if if the link was created in error, or fixing the link if it was a typo. As you can see, there are a bunch of other status codes, and we don't have time to go into those. We also don't have time to go into all the other tabs at the top of Screaming Spider. So if this is something that interests you, you can find a number of guides on the internet that sort of explain this application in a bit more detail and give you additional tips for things you can look for when trying to optimize your site for search. So that covers the Screaming Spider section. The last section in this part of the presentation, I've called general concerns. The reason I've called them general concerns is because it's not as rule-based as what we've looked at before. In all these other items, I've kind of said to you, go into this tool or go into this web page and look for exactly these things. These issues have a bit more nuance to them. Hopefully, though, by reviewing this, I'll give you some ideas of things to think about on your own site, even if these don't necessarily perfectly apply to every single site on the internet. The first thing I'm going to look at is the crawlability of the service pages. So if we look at harmer.com, they have a page that lists out all their services, which is what many recruiting sites have. And as you can see, they operate in 4 different sort of verticals. And then for every vertical, they have a Learn More button. And what they have is a pop-up. And unfortunately, they had some really, really good, well-written text that has a lot of keywords that are probably quite relevant for this industry, and so could perform well in search. However, because this is a pop-up, Google will never crawl this page. As you can see at the top, the URL didn't change, meaning this page doesn't have its own URL. If I close that out, we see the URL stays the same. So what's the number one thing is that your pages have to be crawlable to Google. One way that your page cannot be crawlable is because of pop-ups. There are other ways as well. So if you have a site that has anything that you think might not be crawlable, you may want to fix that issue so that Google can crawl the page and then index it, which means add it to their database. So that's issue number 1 I've identified on this site. The next thing, lack of relevant blog content. This is an issue that's pretty common across a lot of websites on the internet. So everyone wants a blog. People kind of say, make a blog, keep it up to date. It's kind of just something people do, but most people don't really think about what's the purpose of it. Now, if we look at this blog, what we see is a lot of content that talks about the company. So it's very self-promotional. From an SEO perspective, it really has no value. Even from a non-SEO perspective, I don't think it has much value, but that's kind of a different discussion. But we're thinking exclusively about SEO for this conversation. We want to think about, well, how does somebody find a site through blog content? And typically they're not looking for news about the business, they're looking for information that offers posts that offer them value. And if we see there's 7 posts on this site, and we see only one that may have value, which is how to plan your exit strategy from public accounting. So this is actually a decent blog post that would probably have SEO value. It probably gets a little bit of traffic and could help a business, land some leads. However, it's not much value in simply having a single post like that. So if you're going to do a blog, make sure you think about what your audience wants, not what is easy for you to post or what is promotional for your business. If you're really, what happens to a lot of people in blogs is they just tend to let the blog die. If you're going to do that, you should probably consider either taking the blog down or at the very least removing dates from posts so people don't know necessarily that you stopped updating it, especially if you've created a lot of actual valuable content. Next thing, old job listings. This is one that's really, I think, quite relevant for a lot of recruiter sites because I haven't seen a lot of people who do this properly. So if we look on the candidates page, what we see is it's a bit awkwardly structured, but this is supposed to be a listing of all the placements that all the jobs that the company has filled over time. And I think the intention here is to basically position this company as being experts in these certain areas so that people will obviously, believe them when they say when they can place future roles. However, from an SEO perspective, this is a pretty useless page because none of these jobs have any descriptions, which is really unfortunate because I'm sure a lot of these jobs at some point in time had full job descriptions and for some reason they've been cut. So what would be much better is if every single job here was actually a link to a page that had a description of the job. What would happen then, and then obviously these are old jobs, they're filled, so they would have to be clearly marked as being, filled roles. But what would happen from an SEO perspective is if people put in certain searches, some of these jobs would be found, and this person were to end up at this page, obviously the job would be closed, but at least you have them on your site. So you can do a number of things to entice them to look around the site. So if you have old jobs, don't remove them from your site. Keep them on your site. Keep the full text. Just make sure they're closed. And over time, you can actually monitor how many people find your site through those old job postings. And I think you'll be surprised at the value they can offer, especially for what are called long tail keywords. Those are basically search terms that are very long that somebody puts in that are very hard to predict. So, for example, you imagine someone looking for IT recruiter. That might be something you could predict. But if someone types in IT audit Chicago recruiter, you're not likely going to guess that someone's going to put that in. But if you do have a lot of old jobs on your site, you're much more likely to show up in search queries for that type of search term. And the last thing, search results. So this is something you can easily perform on your own site. Go into Google, type in site, and your domain name, and you will see all of the pages that Google has indexed for your site. And as you can see, right away we see the meta description problem that we discussed when we looked at Screaming Spider. We see that there's duplicate meta descriptions, as we saw, but there's actually a much bigger issue here. If we scroll a little bit further, we see that a lot of these pages are being indexed that have really no value. So for example, this is an old job. For whatever reason, all we can see is the job description and there's no actual job content there. So Google's basically spending a lot of time indexing pages on this site that have no value. And what's going to happen is over time, for various reasons, Google will start to believe that this site doesn't have as much value because people, for one, are never going to click on these pages. So they're crawling pages for no reason. And two, what's going to happen is that Google's going to reduce the number of pages they're going to crawl. Um, Hopefully for this company, they don't stop crawling important pages like their homepage and various internal pages and their blog posts. But that is what can happen when Google starts indexing content and they can't figure out why the content is not being visited by anybody. So make sure that whatever is indexed by Google for your site has value. If not, you need to figure out how to either redirect those pages elsewhere or take them down. So that's the key lesson here on how to look at your site through Google's index. So we've covered all of the main topics. Obviously, this is not a comprehensive look. We don't have time to look at absolutely everything, but this hopefully will give you some idea of how to think about on-page SEO, which is really just optimizing your site for search. And next, we're going to do a short demo, about 8 minutes, on how to write the perfect blog post using a tool called Yoast SEO. So I'm going to jump right into that right now. So imagine I am a tech recruiter and I've written a blog post that I want to write a blog post on how do I find a tech recruiter, with the hopes that capturing people who are searching for that query and getting them to read my blog post and discover my business. So, I've written this blog post, and obviously it's all Latin, but for the purposes of this exercise, don't worry too much about it. And, I want to see how well this will perform in search. So the nice thing on a WordPress site, all you have to do is install a plugin called Yoast SEO. It's free. And then you can go through this entire analysis that we're going to go through step by step right now. The first thing you do is figure out what is your focus keyword. This is the keyword that you want to rank for in Google. So in this case, we're going to put in find a tech recruiter, because that's what we hope people search for and find this post. And immediately we have this instant analysis done right at the bottom of the page. So we're going to go through these items and we're going to see why some of them are red, why some are orange, why some are green, and we're going to focus on what we can do to fix it. The first issue I'm going to skip over quickly. The focus keyword contains a stop word. A stop word in this case is or the or and. It's okay to have them here. This is just a recommendation. As you can see, it's gray. I wouldn't worry too much about this one. The next one, the text contains 199 words. This is far below the recommended minimum of 300 words. So Google tends to like longer blog posts. So we've written a relatively short blog post. What we're going to do is add a bit of content to this post. Obviously, if you're writing a real post, we want to make sure this content has real relevance, is not just filler content, which is what a lot of people do sometimes. But we do want to make sure we get at least 300 words, and I think ideally you probably actually want to go to around 1,000. So we've met the criteria now, and so we get a green circle here. The next thing, no meta description has been specified. Search engines will display copy from the page instead. So we discussed how important meta descriptions are. And so you can add a meta description to your page right through Yoast SEO's plugin by choosing Edit Snippet and typing in a meta description. You'd obviously want to put a bit more thought into this, but we're going to do this quickly. This blog post talks about how you can find a tech recruiter when you are looking to fill your next position. Okay. And right away, we get another error. The meta description is under 124 characters long. So, if we were obviously writing this, we'd probably want to think about some additional keywords to put in, but we're just going to fill it up now. And then right away, we get the meta description contains the focus keyword. So find a tech recruiter is in the meta description, and the length of the meta description is sufficient. So we're starting to slowly solve all of these problems for the blog post. The next one, the focus keyword doesn't appear in the first paragraph of the copy. Make sure the topic is clear immediately. So that's a really important thing, is that if we're putting a blog post, sometimes people bury the lead. They just don't get to the point about what they're writing about. What you want to do is make sure that your keyword's right there up front. And typically, it should be very organically something you can insert, assuming that it's easy if that's what you're actually writing about. So right away, we have that fixed. The next one, no images appear in this page. Consider adding some as appropriate. So Google likes images, all things being equal. So if you have appropriate images, you should add them. They're also great just for spicing up a long block of text, which can get obviously a bit tedious. So what I'm going to do, obviously let's just say I have appropriate images. I'm just going to insert a couple of random things for now. And, once that's done, we've added some images to our post. The next thing, no internal links appear in this page. Consider adding some as appropriate. So this is a really important point here. An internal link is a link from one page on your site to another page on your site. And what you want to do throughout your blog posts and throughout your pages is make sure you link as appropriate, so to help Google understand the structure of your site. So for example, this is a blog post on how to find a tech recruiter, and you've referenced another blog post on your site that's related to this topic. Make sure you include a link to that blog post. So for example, how do recruiters find clients? Well, I want to add a link there. And we do that, and we add a couple of links, internal pages, to make sure that Google understands how my site is built. Next point, the keyword density is 0.2%, which is too low. The focus keyword was found 1 time. Basically, what this is saying is that you need to include your keyword a few times. You have to be very careful here to do it in a natural way. It's one thing to write the keyword repeatedly. It's another thing to do what's called keyword stuffing, where basically you're just doing it for the sake of doing it, not because this actually makes sense in a sentence. So obviously this requires a little bit of thought and care for how you might be able to rewrite some sentences in a way to contain your keyword, but not do it in a way that it sounds, unnatural. So, we would obviously have to do this and take a bit more time if we were creating a real blog post, but what we've done is we've added the keyword, and now we get a keyword density of 0.5, was found 3 times. So that's kind of the range we want, about 0.5 to 1%. And the density is meaning basically 0.5% of all this text is the keyword versus the rest is not. We're not going to talk about the slug for this page. It's just not that important. No outbound links appear in this page. So an internal link is obviously a link to somewhere else on your site. An outbound link is a link elsewhere on the internet, anywhere not your site. And Google tends to use this as a sign that you are actually referencing the stuff that you're writing about, and that tends to give what you're writing about a bit more credit. So if I'm writing, obviously, an article and I want to have a source for it, I might use Wikipedia. Obviously, I would reference a specific article, not the homepage, but that might be a way for me to, add some credibility to my blog post. Another thing I might want to do is, obviously, I'm writing about recruiting. Maybe somebody else has written about recruiting, on this particular topic, and I want to reference one of their ideas. And so, I type in, it was say I posted on the site, recruiting daily, and I actually put the whole URL in, and then, right there I have outbound links. So I've done quite well on outbound links. Next thing, the images on this page do not have alt attributes. So alt attributes are typically designed for screen readers or people with visual disabilities, but they can also help you figure out, they can also help you with SEO. So if you've included images and you have actually text to describe that image that's appropriate to contain your keyword, make sure you insert it in there in some form. It doesn't necessarily have to be the full keyword. It might just be tech recruiter in this case. But for SEO purposes, that helps you as well. So now we've gone to the last orange item we're going to address. The SEO title contains the focus keyword, but does not appear at the beginning. Try and move it to the beginning. In this case, we don't have to follow every recommendation because some of them are not natural. I want to write my title, how do I find a tech recruiter? That's a perfectly appropriate title. It has my keyword in it. It's very close to the beginning, even if it's not right at the beginning. So I'm going to ignore this, and you can have the right to do that. You don't have to follow every single piece in this analysis, as long as most of your items are green. And what we've done is we've actually created a very optimized post for the term find a tech recruiter. And by doing so, we are maximizing our odds that when someone searches for this term, our post comes up. Now, one thing to think about is, can you have multiple focus keywords? Well, it's tough. First of all, Yoast doesn't allow it in their free version to even try to do this. You can if you use their paid version. But again, it's best if each post has a single topic. And over time, you can actually, using analytics, figure out if people are actually finding your blog post for this query, for this keyword, or something else. So you can basically see how well you've done. So that covers the Yoast SEO section, and that brings us near the end of our presentation. I just want to quickly summarize this and make a couple of additional points before we get to the Q&A. So first point, site structure matters, but it can take a bit of time and money to get it right. So I gave you a really good overview of a bunch of things you can consider. If you were to find issues, some of those items you might be able to fix yourself. Others you might have to get a developer involved. So it's important that you do this to make sure you have an SEO proper site, but you have to acknowledge that it's not something you can necessarily fix right away. And the second thing is, if you want to optimize every post and blog and page on your site for search, use Yoast SEO on a WordPress site. And if you're really invested in this, but you don't have a WordPress site, what you can do is you can install Yoast on a dummy site, meaning just that's any site that has no value. And you can basically write your posts on that dummy site and then copy the post back to your live site when it's done, and you'll know it's optimized because you've kind of passed the Yoast analysis. So that's a summary of the topics for today. I want to just talk about a couple of items before we do our Q&A. First of all, as promised in the email, I will be giving out an SEO audit for free to one of the attendees. So I'm going to get a list of everybody who attended from Jeremy, and I'm going to reach out to you directly if you won, and we will discuss, how we're going to perform the audit for you and what your deliverable is, which is basically going to be a report, which is typically we charge about $495 for, which will outline all the changes you can make to your site in order to improve it from an SEO perspective. And the second thing is a brief pitch for our company. So if you're interested in purchasing SEO from us or web design or other marketing services, you can email me. My address is there, zach@talentheromedia.com. And we can discuss, setting up a call to learn a bit more about what you're looking to do. And with that, I'm going to go back into the webinar software here, and I'm going to unmute everybody just to let you know. So if you were speaking, you will be unmuted now. And if you want to mute yourself again, go ahead. If anybody has any questions, you can either ask them now or type them into the chat box.
I definitely had a couple, but it looked like Andy Miller may, and I don't know if Christian does. Andy, did you have a question?
I do. Yeah, I don't know how you knew that, but I definitely do. So
I read minds.
You're great, Jeremy. You are great. Hey, so I've worked for some time. I'm curious. I'd love your audit to do an audit because I'm curious how well we are. But so we seem to come up pretty high in Google rankings, and I've had conversations with people who manage my website about doing paid search. Can you speak to how effective? It's a broad question for recruiters. I've heard kind of mixed things about considering doing paid search.
Yeah.
You're talking about pay-per-click, Andy?
Yes.
Yeah, like putting money into a campaign. That way when people click your deal, it costs you a certain amount each time. Okay, what are your thoughts on that, Zach?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that it can be done. It can be done and in a way that provides a positive ROI, but it is quite challenging because you have to do a lot of optimization to find the way to properly target your audience. Meaning that, for example, if you were to set something up, say in Google AdWords, where you're paying for every time someone enters a certain keyword that you want to match against to show your ad against, and then click on, what you'll often find up front is that you're getting a lot of false positives, right? People clicking on your ad who aren't really interested in your business. You may also be missing out on people who are. So what happens is there's typically a period in which you're spending a budget and you're probably not going to see the ROI you're hoping for. But the hope is that over time, as the data comes in, you can kind of adjust your queries that you're bidding against, and you can adjust other things like the landing page, so where the person's going when they click on your ad, adjust the ad text itself, and turn it into a positive ROI campaign. So Short answer is yes, it can be done, but you do have to have a bit of a stomach for some upfront losses as you kind of learn about your audience and how they, what they best respond to.
Yeah, and I would add on to that, Andy. To me, if I had $1,000 budget, for example, or $10,000 budget, for example, is I would say, how am I going to spend that money where it's going to really make a difference to my business? And so, anything that leads to a placement or a new client is going to help me lead a new business. And so, I would say, I would be tempted to maybe use that money for an Indeed campaign. That way, when people would find your job, and then it would redirect them to your website, though, to go and look at the job site, to look at that job and apply. And so it redirects them and gets them onto your website. It's building your brand. And then, things you can do that are no cost is just using better meta descriptions, using better page titles, writing better content that has the right keywords in there, using hyperlinks, which he's talking about, and putting a picture on there. This is just, whether it's you or someone in your firm that does it, these are just like little cheap things that you can do that do work, right? And the other thing I would think about in terms of using a budget would be, and I'm curious to know Zach's response on this. I call it push marketing, but you can put money into a Facebook or a LinkedIn campaign where some kind of content that you have will now show up on the right hand side of people's page, almost like a hidden cookie. But we are doing some Facebook campaigns, and we're putting a little bit of budget into that. But it's actually $5 to $10 a day. So it's something that, and I can turn it on and I can turn it off when I want to. Okay, so we're not putting a lot of money into it, and we're targeting people that have very specific titles using a Facebook campaign, Facebook marketing campaign.
Yeah, Facebook campaign is essentially another form of pay-per-click ads. So instead of targeting people based on what they're searching for, like you can with Google, you can use demographic data, as you mentioned, Jeremy. So that's another option as well. I think what most people have to do is you have to test various options and see how they perform, because it really depends on the exact nature of your campaign, like who you're targeting, what the ultimate goal is. Because not everything works equally well in every industry, in every sub segment of the recruiting industry. So you do have to test things, but I would say that there is a recruiter out there who's optimized, who's figured out how to work every single marketing channel at least one time. It's just a matter of whether or not you can figure it out, or sometimes you can obviously do it with assistance as well.
Absolutely. Did anybody else have any key questions? Christian or Rich?
Not off the top of my head. What was I thinking?
Now, so Zach, was there one of the questions I did have was, I think you did a great job of showing a site that kind of had made some mistakes, and probably hardly any site's perfect, but you showed some specific examples of what the mistakes look like. Do you have an ability quickly to show us a site maybe that you have optimized, just to show us what those page extensions would look like for a recruiting firm, just to kind of show us a positive example of what one that's optimized might look like?
Sure, I can show you. Yeah, I can show you a few. I show you one actually quickly that is a good example of someone who's thought about search. So, for example, this is one. This is a search group. This is a sort of a cross Canada search firm, and their homepage is really talks about what their sort of brand values are. So it's relatively standard. What you can see though is every single one of their they have a page for every office. So they've done a good job of maximizing. So if you have a multi-office site, you want to make sure each one has its own page, not just, for example, a link on your contact page giving the address. And then each of the pages has a list of the recruiters that work for them. So what they found is that by putting the recruiters front and center on every page relevant to the either office or the individual practices that those recruiters are in, those are really nice internal links that help Google understand how to crawl the site. And each one of these pages has a proper meta description and title. So for example, if we look at the source code, this is one kind of way to figure it out. We see that the meta description here, Block Search Group recruits for consumer goods jobs. So they talk about exactly, they talk about exactly what the point of this page is about. It's about consumer goods. And if we look at the title of the page, it has a couple of things. First of all, it uses the word recruitment agency, which is just an indicator to Google of what this site's about, but it also talks about the specific page purpose. So consumer goods jobs, right? That's what they're hoping. That's the search traffic they're hoping to capture with this page. And then again, if we look at career opportunities, we can see a number of job listings, and each job listing has its own page and it has a full description available. And if we were to actually go back in time, we could see that all the job postings that have ever been posted on the site are still visible. And they do get a decent amount of search traffic, even though the job is closed. Finally, here's an example where I think this is a company that's tried to get their blogging strategy off the ground, but didn't do a great job. And this is what happens a lot. So, they have a blog and they're trying to do a combination of pitching their services along with giving more sort of value-based posts. And you can see they've had issues with keeping to deadlines, and so they have tried this, but again, it's not always. It's very hard to get everything right, as you kind of mentioned, Jeremy. Like the Harmer site certainly has some other things that are fine that I didn't really cover, but it takes a lot of time and planning to make sure that you've really optimized everything. And most people they don't put in the upfront effort into it, and then it can be time consuming to fix it later.
And I think something that you've kind of been talking about, and the message has been there, just to make sure everyone gets it, is that having lots of ways to get people redirected back to your site with good content that they're going to enjoy reading, that's not necessarily always about you, but that's just relevant to them. So we're an SAP firm. We're putting a lot of just blog information that's relevant to the SAP market, what's going on, national conferences, some new product that's coming out, a new version of a software, and how that's going to impact the market. Think about the content as that they're going to be interested to click in on, and then we share that across our social media, but with the link to our website, so they can see what it's about. But when they click it, you want them to redirect to your website. It's all about getting people to your website, increasing your brand awareness, and hopefully, if your site is sticky, they're not just going to your site to read that one article, but hopefully they're going to bookmark your site or go, man, there's tons of great content on there for me. Maybe I can't even read it all right now, but I want to go back to that site. Or maybe they do go ahead and click on a second and a third thing. And what you're hoping is ultimately, as a hiring manager, that they're going to say, this is a firm I want to do business with. Or as a candidate, I'm going to wind up looking at some jobs that they have and ultimately apply to something, right? Or at a minimum, create some kind of awareness that this is the firm I need to be working with. This is exactly the kind of firm I want to work with. And so you're building your brand awareness, and that's how it's leading to ROI, because it's going to end up getting you either clients and accounts, new hiring managers, new searches, or candidates that you're going to be able to place. And it's going to lead to real money for you,
That's right.
So
I think just to add one point to that, Jeremy, is that I think you make a good point, is that you want to think about your entire marketing strategy needs to be something that covers every angle. So meaning that, like, we've talked a lot about SEO, but there's also, for example, social media. How do you share content? And I think the idea is to integrate all of those, integrate everything you do into a single strategy. So you're not just writing blog posts with the right keywords so that people find them through search, but you're also writing good blog posts that are actually interesting, so that if you share them on social media, people actually click them and read. So everything needs to kind of make sense, and it's really putting together that big picture strategy of how you tackle everything on your site, so that it's not just done right for SEO, but it also works for social media. It also maybe works as part of like a newsletter campaign you run. Maybe it also, you have your site ready to run ad campaigns. Everything needs to be, thought of holistically, so that you serving your site serves multiple purposes for your business.
Yeah, a thing that I've noticed that happens is that, like a lot of recruiters will do a blog, but they'll write the blog on LinkedIn, on the LinkedIn blog. And so that was an opportunity lost. Like they could have used that same blog, that same content, and put it on their website, and they could have still used LinkedIn as the vehicle of delivery to get people to see that you have that blog with that title, with that content. But it's more powerful for you if they click a site that goes to your website as opposed to staying within LinkedIn to read that whole blog. And
Right.
that's just a mistake that a lot of recruiters make. They put the blog only on LinkedIn. And I mean, you could maybe put it even in both places, but I think
Right.
the more that you can get people to click and drive back to your site, the better you're going to be. And in your third session, Zach, if I could plant a seed, if you maybe weren't already going to do it, but a lot of the WordPress sites, have like Jetpack is one that we use, but they have plug-in tools that allow you to put your content on your website, one time, but that it will automatically push it out to your Twitter, to your LinkedIn, to your Facebook, to where you can streamline processes. If you could maybe build that in a little bit into your third session too, I think the group would really find that interesting.
Sure. Yeah, that's something we can discuss. Absolutely.
Yeah. Good stuff. Well, man, I really appreciate your time.